The key stopped halfway inside the lock. I pulled it out, checked that I had the right one, and tried again. It would not turn. For 34 years, that key had opened the front door of my house. That morning, it did not. I stood on the porch with an overnight bag at my feet and a folder of medical papers tucked beneath my arm. I had just returned from spending 12 days at my sister's home after knee surgery. My son's truck was parked in the driveway. Music was playing inside. Through the living room window, I could see someone moving my furniture. I knocked. A minute later, my son opened the door. He did not look surprised to see me. He looked annoyed. "Mom, you weren't supposed to be back until tomorrow." I held up my key. "What happened to the lock?" He glanced over his shoulder. "I changed it." "Why?" "For security." "Then give me the new key." He did not move. Instead, he stepped into the doorway and said, "We need to talk before you come in," before I came into my own home. That was the moment I understood that the lock had not been changed to keep strangers out. It had been changed to keep me from returning. My son believed that because he had been staying in the house, paying a few bills, and helping during my recovery, he had gained some right to decide what happened next. He had forgotten one simple fact. His name had never been on the deed. My name is Judith Harper. I was 71 years old when my son, Brian, changed the locks on the house I had owned for more than 3 decades. The house stood in a quiet neighborhood outside Des Moines, Iowa. It was a 2-story home with gray siding, white trim, and a narrow porch that faced west. My husband, Alan, and I bought it when Brian was 9 and our daughter, Megan, was 6. Alan taught high school science. I worked as a purchasing coordinator for a medical equipment company. We were not wealthy, but we were careful. We refinanced only once. We paid more than the required amount each month. 3 years before Alan retired, we made the final mortgage payment. He framed a copy of the satisfaction letter and hung it inside his workshop. "That," he said, "is what freedom looks like." After Alan died, the house passed entirely to me. Both our names had been on the deed, with survivorship rights. My attorney explained the process carefully. A new deed was recorded confirming that I was the sole owner. I kept a certified copy in a safe deposit box and another in a locked cabinet at home. Brian knew the house belonged to me. He had known for years. But knowledge and acceptance are not always the same thing. Brian was 46 when the trouble began. He had worked as a residential contractor for most of his adult life. He could repair almost anything. He installed cabinets, replaced roofs, built decks, and remodeled kitchens. He was talented. He was also impulsive. He took on projects before contracts were secure. He bought equipment before payments arrived. He trusted clients who promised to pay later. Then he blamed bad luck when the numbers failed. Alan had helped him more than once. A loan for a truck. Money for tools. A payment to prevent his business insurance from lapsing. Each time, Brian promised it was temporary. Each time, repayment became a sensitive subject. After Alan died, Brian began talking about the house differently. He still called it Mom's house when speaking to me. But when speaking to contractors or friends, I sometimes heard him call it the family property. At first, I ignored it. Parents ignore many small warning signs because correcting them feels unnecessarily harsh. The first serious problem came when Brian moved into my guest room. His marriage had ended. His wife, Rebecca, stayed in their rental home with their 2 children. Brian said he needed a place to live for a few weeks. I agreed. A few weeks became 2 months. Then 4. Brian helped around the house. He repaired a leak beneath the kitchen sink. He replaced a section of fence. He cleaned the gutters. He also began making decisions without asking. He moved tools into Alan's workshop. He used the garage for construction materials. He parked a trailer on the side lawn. When I objected, he said everything was temporary. "You're not using the space," he told me. "I still own the space," he laughed. "Of course you do," but the laughter made the words feel less certain. Brian did not pay rent. He occasionally bought groceries and covered the internet bill. When I suggested a regular contribution, he became offended. I'm doing work around here that would cost you thousands. I didn't ask for thousands of dollars in work. The deck rail was dangerous. You repaired one section. The fence was falling apart. It needed 2 boards. He listed every task as though he were building an ownership claim one repair at a time. I should have insisted he move out then. Instead, I told myself he was recovering from divorce. I told myself family should help family. That phrase can hide a great deal of imbalance. Megan saw the situation more clearly. She lived in Omaha with her husband and 2 children. During a visit, she noticed Brian's tools in the workshop and the trailer on the lawn. "How long is he staying?" she asked. "He's looking for a place. Has he shown you any places?" "No." "Has he applied anywhere?" "I don't know." She lowered her voice. "Mom, I think he believes this is his place now. He knows better." Knowing and behaving are different. I defended him. Megan did not argue. "Before leaving," she said, "keep your papers somewhere he can't access them." I told her she was being dramatic. 3 months later, I discovered Brian had requested an insurance quote for the house in his own name. A local agent called me because the ownership information did not match. Mr. Harper stated that he was taking over management of the property. The agent explained. "What does taking over management mean?" He did not clarify. I asked Brian about it. He said he was comparing prices. "You don't have authority to change my insurance." I wasn't changing it. "You gave them your name as the person managing the property. I live here." "That doesn't make you the manager," he sighed. "Mom, you turn everything into a legal issue." "It became a legal issue when you used your name for my property." He walked away. That night, he did not eat dinner with me. The next morning, he apologized. He said stress had affected his judgment. He said he only wanted to save me money. I accepted the apology. But I called my insurance company and added a verbal password to the account. That was the first protective step I took. It would not be the last. Around that time, my right knee became much worse. Years of arthritis had damaged the joint. Walking upstairs became painful. My doctor recommended replacement surgery. Brian immediately said the house was no longer suitable for me. "You need everything on one level," he said. "I need a better knee. You'll still have stairs. I'll recover." "What if you do?" Megan offered to stay with me after surgery. My sister Carol offered too. Brian said that was unnecessary because he already lived there. He promised to prepare meals, drive me to appointments, and help with exercises. His concern sounded genuine. And part of it probably was. People do not always begin with a complete plan. Sometimes selfishness grows inside an opportunity. I had the surgery in early September. The procedure went well. I spent 2 nights in the hospital and then returned home. For the first week, Brian was helpful. He brought ice packs. He kept track of my medication schedule. He moved a chair into the downstairs den so I could avoid the stairs. He drove me to physical therapy. Then his behavior changed. He began telling people I could not manage alone. He told the physical therapist that I was forgetful. He told Carol that I had nearly fallen in the bathroom. I had not. He told Megan that I was confused by medication. I was not. When I corrected him, he said he was only being cautious. One afternoon, I heard him on the phone in the kitchen. "She can't stay here long term," he said. "The layout doesn't work." I assumed he was speaking to Megan. Then he said, "Once she's settled somewhere smaller, I can handle the renovations." I entered the kitchen. "Who are you talking to?" He ended the call quickly. "A contractor." "About my house." "Just asking questions. What renovations?" "Nothing decided." "You just said once I was settled somewhere smaller." He put his phone on the counter. "You're listening to half a conversation. I heard the part about moving me. I'm planning ahead." "For whom?" "For everyone." I asked what everyone meant. He said the house needed major updates. The kitchen was old. The flooring was worn. The upstairs bathroom needed work. If I moved to a smaller property, the house could be renovated and either sold or rented. "Who would decide that?" I asked. "We would." "There is no we." His expression hardened. "You can't keep treating this place like a museum. I live here. You barely use half of it. I don't need to use every room to own it." He accused me of being emotional. I told him he was discussing my home as though I had already left. He said my recovery was making me sensitive. That evening, I called Megan. She was silent for several seconds after I told her. "Mom, I want you to come stay with me. I'm recovering better here. Brian is making plans. He can make all the plans he wants. He cannot sell the house. Are you sure he doesn't have access to anything? He has no power of attorney. Does he know where the deed copy is? I moved it. Does he have your identification numbers? He might know some." Megan asked me to call my attorney. His name was Thomas Lee. He had handled Alan's estate and prepared my updated documents. Thomas confirmed that Brian had no authority over the property. He also advised me to review my will, power of attorney, and financial accounts. My current power of attorney named Megan and Carol jointly. Brian was not included. That decision had been made years earlier because Megan was organized and careful, while Brian had ongoing debt. Brian had never known. I had not hidden it deliberately. It simply had not been his business. Thomas advised me to keep it that way. 2 weeks after surgery, I developed an infection near the incision. The doctor caught it early, but I needed additional treatment and rest. Carol insisted that I stay with her for a short period. Her house was 1 level. She lived closer to the medical center. I agreed to 12 days. Before leaving, I told Brian exactly when I planned to return. "I'll keep an eye on everything," he said. "I don't want any work done, I know. No contractors. Fine. No changes." He raised both hands. "Mom, I understand." I packed medication, clothes, and paperwork. I locked the cabinet in my bedroom. I took the spare house key with me. Brian watched from the porch as Carol drove away. During the first few days at Carol's home, he called regularly. He said the house was fine. The cat was eating. The mail was on the counter. Then the calls became shorter. On the 7th day, my neighbor Helen Brooks sent me a message. "Did you approve construction at your house?" I called her. She said a dumpster had been placed in the driveway. 2 workers were carrying cabinets through the garage. The front door had been painted. I felt heat rise in my face. I called Brian. He did not answer. I called again. He sent a message. "Busy, will call later." I replied. "Stop all work immediately." He called within 2 minutes. "You're overreacting. What work is happening? Just cleanup and preparation." "Preparation for what? The kitchen has to be updated eventually." "I told you no work. I'm paying for it." "With what money?" "My money." "Why would you pay to renovate my kitchen?" "Because I'm investing in the property." The phrase was deliberate. Investing in the property. Not helping his mother. Not fixing a cabinet. Investing. "You do not have permission," I said. "You told me the kitchen was old. I did not tell you to remove it. The cabinets were falling apart. They were functional. You're not here." "I am returning in 5 days." Silence. Then he said, "That may not be the best idea." I gripped the phone. "What does that mean?" "You need more time to recover. My doctor says I can return. Carol's house is safer. My home is my home. We need to talk about that." "No, you need to stop the workers." He said he would call me back. He did not. Carol wanted to drive me home immediately. I agreed to wait until morning because it was late and my knee was swollen. Before leaving, I called Thomas. He told me to document everything. He also advised me not to enter a confrontation alone. Carol came with me. Megan began driving from Omaha. When we reached the house the next morning, the dumpster was still in the driveway. The kitchen cabinets were stacked in the garage. The front door was a different color. And my key no longer worked. Brian opened the door after I knocked. He stood in the doorway with sawdust on his shirt. "Mom, you should have called." "I did. I mean before coming. It is my house. We need to talk. Give me a key." He did not. Instead, he said the locks had been changed because contractors were entering and leaving. I asked why I had not received a new key. He said he was going to give me one after we discussed the living arrangement. Carol stepped forward. "What living arrangement?" Brian looked at her. "This is between me and Mom. It stopped being private when you locked her out." He said no one was locked out. I held up the useless key. "What do you call this?" He opened the door slightly wider. "You can come in if we agree on some rules." I stared at him. "Rules for my house, for safety." "What safety rule requires my permission to enter?" "You're recovering. There are exposed areas in the kitchen." "Then stop the work. The materials are already purchased. That was your decision, and I've put money into this place." There it was. The argument he had been building. Repairs. Groceries. Time. Materials. Every favor converted into an imaginary share of ownership. "How much?" I asked. "What?" "How much money have you put into my house?" He hesitated. "About 18,000. Without permission, you knew improvements were needed. I explicitly told you not to begin work. You'll benefit from it. Then you should have obtained my agreement." His voice rose. "I've spent years helping you. You lived here without rent. I maintained the property. You repaired small things and used the garage for your business. I'm the only one who stayed. Staying does not place your name on the deed." His face changed when I said that. He stepped outside and lowered his voice. "Eventually this house comes to Megan and me. Eventually is not today. You're 71 and alive. You can't manage a renovation. I didn't request one. You can't use the upstairs properly. That does not make the property yours." He said I was being ungrateful. I said he was confusing family help with legal authority. Then he told me the real plan. He had spoken to a lender. If the kitchen and bathrooms were updated, the property could support a large renovation loan. Brian wanted to use the house as collateral for working capital. He claimed the loan would be in his business name, but secured through an interest in the property. "How do you plan to create an interest in a house you don't own?" I asked. He looked away. Then I understood. He believed the money he spent on improvements gave him a claim. Perhaps someone had told him about construction liens. Perhaps he believed occupancy and investment created ownership. He had confused several legal ideas and selected the version most useful to him. "I have invoices," he said. "For work you ordered yourself. I improved the property. You removed my kitchen without consent. You'll thank me when it's finished." "No, you will remove yourself from my house," he laughed. "You can't just throw me out. I can end your permission to live here. This is my residence. It is my property. The law doesn't work the way you think." I looked at him. "That may be true. That is why my attorney is coming." The confidence left his face for a second. "You called a lawyer?" "I called my lawyer. You're turning this into a legal fight. You changed the locks." Brian stepped closer. "Mom, don't do this. Give me a key." "Not until the kitchen is safe. Then open the door and let me collect what I need. You're staying with Carol. You do not decide where I stay." He refused again. Carol called the police non-emergency number. Brian accused us of creating a scene. A patrol officer arrived 20 minutes later. He listened to both sides. Brian said he lived there and had changed the locks during construction. I stated that I was the sole owner, had never authorized the lock change, and was being denied access. The officer did not decide a property dispute on the porch. He asked for identification and proof of ownership. I had my driver's license, but not the deed. Thomas arrived while we were speaking. He brought a certified copy. The deed listed one owner. Judith Harper. Not Brian. Not the family. Not Harper Construction. Me. Thomas explained that Brian might have rights as an occupant requiring a lawful removal process, depending on the facts. But occupancy did not give him ownership. It did not allow him to exclude the legal owner. And it did not authorize him to encumber or transfer the property. The officer told Brian he needed to allow me access. Brian finally stepped aside. The inside of the house looked worse than I expected. The kitchen had been stripped to the walls. My dining room furniture had been moved into the living room. Boxes of my belongings were stacked in the hallway. Alan's workshop had been emptied. Brian's business equipment filled the space. I walked slowly through the rooms. My knee hurt, but the deeper pain came from seeing how completely he had begun treating the house as his. In the upstairs bedroom, I found a desk covered in documents. Brian tried to close the door. Thomas stopped him. "Mrs. Harper has the right to enter every room of her property." On the desk was an appraisal, a contractor's estimate, a loan application, and a document titled Property Contribution Agreement. The agreement claimed that Brian had contributed labor and materials toward improving the house and expected an ownership interest in return. There was a signature line for me. I had never seen it. Another page contained a draft quitclaim deed. If signed, it would transfer a partial ownership interest from me to Brian. My name was typed beneath the signature line. His plan had not been completed. But it was clear. Renovate the house. Claim investment. Pressure me to sign. Use the new ownership interest to support financing. The changed locks were not merely about safety. He needed control of the property long enough to move the plan forward. Thomas photographed every document. Then he asked Brian whether any deed had been signed or recorded. Brian refused to answer. Thomas checked the county records from his phone. No transfer had been recorded. No lien appeared. The house remained solely mine. That was the legal detail Brian had ignored. Paying for unauthorized work did not automatically place his name on the deed. Living in the house did not make him an owner. Calling repairs an investment did not create title. And without title or valid authority, he could not pledge my property as though it belonged to him. Thomas advised me not to change Brian's access immediately without following the correct legal process. I hated hearing that.